us from. It's either good afternoon or it's good morning. Welcome to this presentation that we're making in collaboration with Stella Rentals. My name is Eduardo Mandri. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Angel Host. I'll explain in a second who exactly we are and what's our relationship with Stella Rentals. We'll get to that in just a moment. And joining me in this call, I have also the team from Stella Rentals, of course, and some faces that you might recognize. We have Joanna and Becky from our account management team. And we also have Ruben from our business development team in the Mayan Riviera. Thank you guys for joining, as well as Gladys. I see you show up with Joanna's name on your computer, but it's actually Gladys joining us as well. And Anita joining me from the Angel Host marketing team. So we hope that this presentation today will provide you some very interesting insights into what we know about the market in Playa and Tulum, and most importantly, what the team at Stella Rentals and the team at Angel Host, what we're both doing to maximize your rentals in this year. Very important, please don't feel free to, throughout the presentation, to ask questions. I will be addressing those questions at the end. There's a Q&A button on your screen in the lower part of the Zoom. So feel free to enter your questions as they come to mind, and I'll be very happy to answer them, either myself or someone from the Stella Rental team at the end. Very well. So let's get started about the agenda, what we're going to be covering today. Just a very brief introduction of who we are, so that you understand, why Stella Rentals, why Angel Host, what's the relationship between both companies, and then we're going to jump right into the market in Playa. All the information that we have gathered about this very important market in Mexico. And then the bulk of the presentation will be centered around the strategies that we're taking in order to maximize your rental income in 2024, and leaving enough time towards the end for any questions that you might have. So today's presentation is a presentation by Stella Rentals in collaboration with us at Angel Host. Who's doing what? Well, as most of you joining this call, you are working clearly with Stella Rentals. Stella Rentals is the local team in the Mayan Riviera that is helping taking care of your property, right? So Stella Rentals takes care of your cleaning, your maintenance, your concierge services, welcoming your guests when they arrive in Mexico. They're also the ones producing your account statements, taking care of all your bills, and so on and so forth. So they are the local experts. They have been in this market for many, many years with different names, right? Some of you might have known Stella Rentals as Mosquito Vacation Rentals or as Playa District. Some of these companies have been coming together to form this entity, this company called Stella. And on the other hand, we have Angel Host, of which I'm the CEO of this company. Stella has requested that Angel Host provide with the services of everything having to do with marketing your property and ensuring your property gets the maximum amount of sales. So at Angel Host, we have a team of revenue managers and channel specialists and listing optimization specialists. We have an entire team. It's a pretty large team supporting the Stella Rentals team to make sure that you get the best results from your property. And we do it in a very technologically advanced way. We have a very good team of professionals around the world, but we make sure to match these professionals with the right technology in order to produce the best possible results. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but just know that we've had over 12 different pieces of technology that allows us to rent your homes in the best possible way. The methodology that we follow as Angel Host and the one that we're going to be following during 2024 works. We know this because we have implemented this same methodology, not just in Mexico, but around the world with clients that Angel Host has including, of course, Stellar Rentals, that allows us to outperform the market by at least 50%. Now, Angel Host is a global company. We have a presence in over 50 cities. We help manage over 1,200 properties, more than 300 in Playa and Tulum. A good portion of them is the Stellar Rentals portfolio, but we also have information and we help other property management companies in the area maximize their sales. And we have a team of over 80 people working with us. So enough about the introduction, enough about who we are. Let's jump into what we're here for. You're here to learn a little bit more about the market, what we see, what are the new trends. Let me start by mentioning that, of course, the Mayan Riviera is by far probably one of the most important markets in Mexico. And you probably find about a bit over 40,000 properties. That's what providers like Key Data and AirDNA are telling us. And as you can see from this image, the largest number of rentals are in Playa del Carmen, simply because it's a city that was established from the get-go as a vacation rental destination. But Tulum has been the fastest growing of all of them. And we'll get to those numbers in just a second. So let's talk about Playa. Playa, as of today, as the latest count that we have, has about a bit over 14,000 properties that are on the short-term rental market. For those of you from Playa, this map will look familiar. You can see here Constituyentes right here in the middle, and you can pretty much see how the properties are evenly split north and south of Constituyentes. The market growth in the last 3-4 years has been about 25%, which we consider to be high, but still reasonable. And as of January 2024, compared to January 2023, we only saw a 1% increase in rentals. So I think we can start considering Playa del Carmen a more mature market. And we actually see, as you will see in the next few slides, we see an interesting balance between supply and demand. The vast majority of the inventory in Playa del Carmen, we're talking about 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. That's where you have actually about 80% of the total inventory, and only 20% of the inventory are 3 bedrooms or more. Now, how has occupancies changed in Playa in 2023 versus 2022? So yes, even though there's an increase in tourism traveling to Mexico, the visitors have more and more options. So we actually saw a 7% drop in overall occupancy in 2023. And it's mostly because of the increase that we were seeing before here of 18% in 2023 of the supply. So even though we had a lot of visitors arriving in Playa del Carmen, because of this 18%, part of it was covered from more tourists, but at the same time, there was just not enough to have the same occupancy rate throughout the year. This is just the average overall. Maybe your property or maybe the category of property that you have might have a different occupancy, but this is just overall. The average income, however, per property did go up slightly, about 2%. Why is this? Well, because the rates did go up a little bit because of inflation. So yes, occupancy rate is slightly lower, but the income per property was slightly higher one year versus the other. Now, Tulum is a very different story. Tulum, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, is a market that has been exploding. If you've been recently to Tulum or in the past 2 to 3 years, you've seen the large number of developments everywhere from Aldea Sama to La Veleta to downtown Tulum. Everywhere there's a new development coming up. And what we've seen in the last 3 years is a massive 90% growth in supply. Now, I don't think there's many markets around the world that have grown at this rate. So even though the tourism in Tulum has been increasing, it certainly hasn't caught up with the incredible increase in supply that you can see on this graph. And that, of course, poses issues when it comes to maximizing revenues because you have obviously a lot of competitors in the picture. Very similar to Playa del Carmen, the vast majority of rentals, about 79, 80%, you're talking about 1 and 2 bedroom properties. So um, a lot of the analysis that we're going to be presenting here relates to properties that fall in that precise category. Tulum, what about the occupancy? Well, we had an occupancy rate in 2022 of 42, and we did experience a very severe drop in occupancy in 2023. Once again, this is due to the enormous increase in the number of units in that market. And unfortunately, compared to Playa, well, in terms of revenues, it didn't fare well because with such a large increase in the number of units, the average income per property dropped from 12,000 to close to 10,000 in 2023. Again, this is the average, skewed by a lot of studios and 1 bedrooms. If you have a 2, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, 5 bedroom property, you would obviously see higher numbers, but you would have seen most likely lower numbers in 2023 than what you experienced in 2022. How are things looking ahead? We obviously monitor very closely changes in supply and demand and what we call pacing reports. We want to see how things are looking in the months ahead so that we can take corrective actions when it comes to rates. In the market in Playa del Carmen for the first quarter 2024, we have seen between January and February a drop. March and April are looking better. But once again, yes, a bit of a drop versus last year, which has forced us to look much more carefully into the rates and other elements that can help us sustain the same level of bookings, at least in the Stella Rentals portfolio. But Tulum is Tulum. I wish I had better news, but Tulum is looking not as good as we would have liked, right? Whereas Playa in the previous slide, you can see a 14, 16% drop versus 2023. We had 30%, almost 50% drop so far for February 2024. Same day as of, so on February 15th of last year, the occupancy rate for February was around 40%. On February 15th of this year, it's only at 21%. So, and moving forward, it doesn't look to be recovering that well. So we have to be very aware of the market situation. Will it always remain like this? Of course not. We have the Tulum airport being opened. We have the Tren Maya that is coming up. There's a lot of things that will, of course, make business recover in Tulum, but we have to, of course, keep a very close eye on how the numbers look in the short term. So it's important to mention that the fact that the market overall drops doesn't necessarily mean that we also have to just basically say, well, there's nothing to do and the numbers will be lower. There's a lot of things that can be done to actually revert that situation for your properties in particular. Overall, the Stella Rentals portfolio, we keep track of it very closely, of course. And through third-party suppliers, this numbers here on the screen come from a supplier called Key Data. Key Data aggregates all of the numbers from all the professional property managers in Playa del Carmen and in Tulum and tells us how our properties, the line in blue, compare on average with the rest of the market, the line in orange. And it tells you every month what is the average daily revenue that the properties that we have produced versus the properties, the average properties in the market. So what we can see here is that the properties where we participated produced on average $69 per day, whether they were booked or not, compared to the market at $41. So the properties that we help manage, probably including yours, outperformed the market by about 70% in Playa del Carmen. And even though the numbers are much lower in Tulum, we also managed to outperform the market in Tulum. Now, why am I saying this? I'm not trying to show off. I'm just trying to tell you that the strategies that I'm going to be mentioning work well, especially when we have the freedom to implement them. And I'm going to explain exactly what those methodologies are so that your property can produce, if you so wish, much better results than the market. And let me explain why I meant what I mean when I say if you wish to produce more. Let's talk about what are these strategies that we recommend for you and for anyone wanting to truly outperform the market and produce the most out of your property. And here's a very important question that we always ask property owners to question themselves. What type of owner are you really? And this is a very important question, because based on the type of owner that you are, your strategy will be different, right? Let me give you specific examples. If you consider yourself as an owner that bought the property to rent it, or if you're an owner that bought your property as a second home, well, if you really bought it as a place to make money from, you will be restricting your use during high season, right? Of course, maybe you want to go sometimes with your family during, January or February or March, that is the peak season, or maybe during Christmas. But for the most part, you're going to try to leave those days empty. If this is your second home and you bought it to enjoy it with family and friends, you can visit your property whenever you please. Now, when it comes to maintenance, sometimes you're going to hear your account manager from Stella Rentals telling you, listen, we need to fix that air conditioning, or we need to change that bed, or those chairs outside, we need to actually change them. If you consider this your business, that type of maintenance cannot wait. If, however, this is your second home, that maintenance can wait forever, right? It's your property ultimately, so you decide to put in the property whatever you want and to maintain it as often as you want. The same with the amenities and the decoration. If your account manager at Stella Rentals tells you, you know what, we need to buy some hair dryers, it's important to have them, or it's important to have that air conditioning working well, or it's important to remove some of the decoration that you have, it's important to follow the recommendations, because that's what the market wants. If this is your second home, you're free to put in whatever decorations and amenities that please you. A very important point to consider is that when you are managing your property as a business, you have to keep in mind that every 5 to 7 years, it has to be, if not fully remodeled, it has to be updated. This is what hotels do, and this is what you also need to do if you want your property to stay current. Sometimes, clients call us and say, why am I not able to rent the same price that I was renting 3 or 4 years ago? Well, in part, it could be the market, but an important part could also be the recency of your unit, right? If I walk into your unit and it feels like it was built in the 90s, I'm sure it looks very nice, but it doesn't mean that the guests that are looking to book will book your property. Another thing, and the most important thing, has to do with the rates. And I would like to emphasize this, I would like to double bold this comment. If you are an owner that wants to make money from your property, you need to let a professional decide your rates. If it's your second home, you can decide whatever rates you want. You wanted to rent it at a minimum of $200 a night, you can rent it at a minimum of $200 a night. If you want a minimum of $1,000 a night, whatever you decide is the right rate. But if you want it to be a business, you have to let the professionals decide based on supply and demand. So on the left, you will be treating your vacation as a business, your vacation property. On the right, you're treating it as a second home. And what's the difference? Well, on the left, you have low control. Yes, you don't control the rates. You don't control when maintenance happens. You don't control many things, but it will provide you with maximum income. If you want to play along these lines, then you have to consider your vacation a second home, and you will have maximum control but lower income. There's nothing wrong with being a vacation property owner that just wants to enjoy their property. Just don't expect to be able to do all of these things and at the same time maximum income. They're just not compatible one with the other. So what strategies do we follow? What properties, what do we do in order to maximize the revenues? If you want to operate this as a business, okay, every example I'm going to give you right now has to do if you want to maximize your revenue as a business, not as a vacation rental owner. Number one, We will be defining and we will continue to define rates based on market supply and demand. Okay, what does that mean? It means that we need to analyze your property in a very objective way. It's not about how much you paid for the property. It's not about how much you love your property. It's not about any of that. It's about the location. It's about the amenities. It's about the ratings that your property is getting. It's about the number of competitors that you have in your area. And of course, it's also about your cost of operation. We don't want to rent your property at a price where you lose money. Never. That would be stupid, right? We need to make sure that you have a profitable business. But so we have to take that into consideration. But what are the very common mistakes that property managers make, or that property managers are forced to make by the owners? Number one is using prices that are similar to the area. Determining a price based on what on average my neighbors have is a big mistake, right? Because the properties can be very different. Just one building to the next can have very different amenities. One can have a beautiful pool on the rooftop and the other one might not have a pool. Or maybe one is a very brand new building, whereas the other one was built in the 90s. We cannot consider area as the only and sole determining factor. Second mistake would be assuming that the price had to be the same or higher than last year. As I just showed you in the terms of how the market in Playa and Tulum are performing, there's increased supply. So in times of increased supply, the prices have to drop. Whenever there's limited inventory, the prices can go up. And that's our responsibility to monitor and to monitor on a real-time basis. And the worst mistake that we see clients making, owners making, is basing the prices on what you think is best or what you heard someone else renting at. You can't imagine how many times I hear, and not only with the Stellar Rentals owners, but around the world, owners saying, my neighbor rented at $200 a night or $1,000 a night. And 100 times out of 100, we realize that it's not very accurate information, or maybe they rented it once and they got lucky, or maybe they rented it to their brother-in-law and they paid that rate. There's always an explanation. But basing prices on what we believe, and by we, I mean just any person believes, is not the right approach. The way we do it is we use what's called dynamic pricing. The term dynamic pricing is something that you're all familiar with. If any of you has bought an airline ticket in recent days or recent years, you will notice how much the prices of tickets vary depending on the day of the week, depending on the time you want to come back, depending on whether you're willing to make a connection. I actually worked with Air Canada for a number of years, and I was very close to the dynamic pricing department. And I can tell you, this is how airlines make money. This is what makes or breaks an airline when determining the revenue, is how well they implement dynamic pricing. And that's exactly what we bring to the table and what we do. What is dynamic pricing? Are prices that adjust dynamically based on supply and demand. And it's the price that is going to guarantee the maximum yearly income. It's not going to guarantee you that you're going to get the highest price per reservation. It's going to guarantee the highest yearly income. Now, in the past, most property management companies, and still today, manage prices by season. In this graph that I produced here, you can see here this thick line shows how the pricing would be handled if you wanted to price at a high price during high season, at a low price during low season, and mid-price during mid-season. And the other graph shows how we are pricing the property, right? Within high season, you have weekends, and weekends should be sold higher. But you also have some days midweek that are not going to rent well, and it's better off to sell them at a lower price than leaving the property empty. So dynamic pricing are these constantly adjusting rates where we use technology and a professional revenue manager to be constantly monitoring supply and demand and the specifics of your property to get the maximum revenue out of it. Now, this is a screenshot that I took this morning from one of the units that we manage in Playa del Carmen. And these are the rates that we have for the month of March. Whenever you see darker gray, it means that it has already been reserved. These other dates here, they haven't been booked yet. And notice just how much prices fluctuate. You can have prices as low as $265 You can have prices as high as $553. In fact, this property was already booked during these dates at $550 a night. But just notice how much it fluctuates. Also notice how you see this little number here that says 2 and 2, or it says 3. That's the minimum number of nights that we allow people to book this property for. So we're looking at December right now. We wouldn't allow anybody to book a property for less than 7 nights. Why? Because it's December. We have a lot of time to book that property. We can book it at a high price for a long length of stay. But as the dates approach, and for example, if I'm looking at March 13, we lower the minimum number of nights people can stay in order to maximize the revenue. So this is how dynamic pricing looks in real life. Now, having dynamic pricing is just the start. We have to be very flexible, especially when it comes to last minute reservations, right? With the owners that we work with that give us full flexibility, that treat this as a business and allow us to rent at whatever price the market is willing to pay, the results can be exceptional. I'm going to give you an example, a very specific example of 2 luxury condos that we help manage in Tulum. We're going to call it just property 1 and property 2, just in case one of the owners is in the call here today, okay? But property 1 had an average daily rate of $87, property 2 of $123. So clearly, just from this line, you would say, I would like to be property 2. I prefer to rent my property at $120 a night than to rent it at $87. And look at the lowest rate. Property 1 gave us full flexibility in terms of pricing, and there were nights, midweek, last minute reservations that we went as low as $54 per night, whereas property 2 had an indication by the owner that he did not want to rent at less than $100 per night. In terms of the highest rate, well, they both rented very high during high season, $192 this one, $187. But look at what happened with the occupancy in 2023. The occupancy rate of the owner that said, I do not want to rent at less than $100 because I paid a lot for my condo, because it's beautiful, because, ended up having a 28% occupancy rate. Whereas the person that said, treat this as a business, rent it at whatever price needs to be rented, had a 57% occupancy. So the difference, and this is very telling, is that the property 1 managed to attract many bookings where the ADR was under $100, and that gave him $12,000 of income. Whereas in this category, property 2 produced $0 because of the minimum rate requirement. And look at the enormous difference that property 1, despite selling at an average lower rate, produced compared to property 2. We're talking about a 50% increase. Now, if there's any accountants on the line, I can assure you that your first thought says, well, I might have sold more, but what about my wear and tear? And what about the electricity bills and the maintenance? I don't think I would have made more money. So let me show you the numbers. And just before that, this is just a graphical representation of these bookings that are marked in red are the bookings that property 1 received. 9 bookings at around $50 to $65 and 14 bookings between $65 and $85. These are the bookings that the second property didn't get because of that minimum price requirement. So let's look at the cost that I was mentioning. This is the example of the property that produced 12,000. This is the example of the property that produced 18,000. Now, bear with me. It looks like a lot of numbers on the screen, but bear with me. It's very interesting. Number 1, you have to remember that your property, whether it's used or not used, still has a fridge that is using electricity. It still probably has a pool that has a pool filter that has to continue running. And most likely your air conditioning cannot be completely turned off because then the humidity is going to go through the roof and you're going to have to start changing a lot of things because of humidity problems. So you have what we call a baseline electricity fee that you're going to pay regardless of whether your condo is used or not. You also have your HOA fees. You cannot go to the building and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay my fees because I didn't have any tourists arriving in my property this month, or they're not going to charge you because you had more. That's a fixed fee that you have to pay every month. There's also the fee that you pay Stella Rentals, right? there's a monthly fee. This is an example for a one-bedroom condo in Tulum, right? You're paying it because someone needs to be taking care of your property. And of course, you pay a commission for every rental that happens. Now, this is the other part, the other variable cost. That's when you factor in the additional wear and tear, the additional electricity, the additional water bill. And yes, it's going to be much higher. You will be ending up paying much more. But at the end of the day, what matters as a business is what is your net profit. If you say, I don't want to rent at less than $100 a night, well, your profit would have been $800. If you say, I'm willing to rent at whatever price the market dictates, then you would have made a $3,000 profit. So the numbers that we recommend, the numbers that we follow, we are also business people. We want to make sure that this makes sense for everybody. But let's not forget, it's the market that dictates the rates, it's not really us. And the same applies I have this quick example. I'm not going to take as much time explaining it, but it's the same example. This is a budget property in Tulum. This one rented at $84 and this one at $51. This is a very dramatic example because notice at the lowest rate. At the lowest rate, this property, which is not an ugly looking property, I have to say. Actually, I've stayed at that property and I can tell you it's quite nice. It rented at $15 a night. Now, did it always rent at $15 a night? Of course not. It was some last minute booking on a Tuesday and Wednesday that would have remained empty. And that booking doesn't mean that every day was booked at $15 a night. Maybe the Tuesday was at $15 a night and the next day was at $60 a night. But that allowed us, and we'll talk about this in a second, to get a booking, to get an amazing rating, because the person that paid $70 for those 2 nights was ecstatic, was super happy. And as we'll see in a few seconds, also the Airbnbs of this world and Booking.coms of this world and the Expedias of this world love properties that get rented often. They're the ones that get priority, and we'll get to that in a second. So same story here. This property that had full flexibility produced much higher revenues than the property that had no flexibility. In fact, more than half of the revenues of this first property, you can see it here, more than half of the revenues came from bookings under $50, which was the minimum that the property had given. Let's move on now. So the key takeaway from this, and we can't insist enough, is allowing experts to determine rates is the best way to secure higher income. If from the time that I worked at Air Canada, if the CEO of Air Canada came to see the revenue managers and told them, you are not selling my seat for less than $300 and at $300, are you crazy? This is an Airbus 330. The plane is $120 million. Those seats are so expensive. I don't want to get any hooligan paying $50 for a seat. Well, the plane would go half empty. The way Air Canada and airlines around the world maximize their revenues precisely by having different prices depending on the route, depending on many other factors. We conducted a study worldwide with all of our clients. My revenue management department did this, and I asked them, please divide our clients by those that give us full flexibility versus the ones that don't give us flexibility, and compare how much revenue they produce compared to the average market. And the results were just incredible. 57% underperformance versus the market for those owners that wanted to tell us exactly what to do, versus 150% performance above the market for those that trusted the science and trusted our technology and professionals. Now, not everything is price. Pricing is crucial, but we also try to understand how the algorithms from Airbnb and Booking.com work. In the Mayan Riviera, specifically in Tulum and Playa, you will see that about 70% of all of the bookings come from Airbnb, followed by VRBO, many tourists mainly from the US, and Booking.com, mostly tourists from Europe. So given that this is the distribution, we need to really understand how each of this channel works so that we can maximize your presence in those channels. Now, what do these channels want? You know, because some people call us and say, well, I've been doing some search and my property doesn't come up, or my neighbor or my family, my mother making a search and my property is not coming up. Your property will come up depending on who you are, depending on your profile, depending on what you have booked before. But ultimately, what dictates what properties show up in the top of the results of Airbnb is what converts. Think about it this way. If you're Airbnb and someone is doing a search, for a one-bedroom condo in Playa del Carmen or Tulum, and you have 7,000 options to choose, which option will you show at the top? Well, you're going to show the one that is most likely to be booked by the clients, right? So it's all about conversion. So if we think in terms of conversion, we'll be able to master these booking channels and get the most out of them. So what are the factors that influence this conversion the most? One, of course, having a competitive price. If you do a search and your property looks amazing on the screen, but the price is very high, people will just not book. Unless you're the last property available, people will simply not book. The ratings make a very important effect on the conversion rates. I mean, I'm sure you have all done a search on Airbnb, and you have also made decisions based on what other people are saying. The use of promotions, extremely important. We'll talk about that in a second, and the response time. If someone is asking a question about your property, and the person was actually in the West Coast in the US, in LA, and it's 10 p.m. LA time, but it's already 1 o'clock in the morning in Playa del Carmen, and you don't answer within 10 or 15 minutes, you're losing your chance of actually getting that booking. So it's important to be able to reply and reply quickly. And that's what one of the things that we do at Angel Host. We have a team partially based in America, partially based in Europe, and that allows us to answer all of those guest inquiries 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, some people ask me, Eduardo, what about having multiple listings? You know, if one listing is good, what about having 2 listings or 3 listings or 4 listings? And I can tell you that it's a really bad practice for a number of reasons. Number one, rate synchronization. Unless you have some sort of sophisticated system that will ensure that your listings have the same prices across the board, what's going to end up happening is that the listing where you forgot to update your prices or that has the lowest prices, that's the one that is going to be booked. Second problem, you're going to have double bookings. Again, unless they're perfectly synchronized. And if you tell me, oh, we have iCal calendars, well, iCals fail, and you end up with a double booking, that can be very costly. And of course, most importantly, if Airbnb detects that you have the same property more than once, your both accounts get canceled. And this has happened. We've seen it happen. So this is not just anecdotal. We have seen the letters from Airbnb when some of our clients have a second listing and we get the letter from Airbnb saying, we are suspending your payments until you stop one of these 2 listings because they're one and the same. Now, we like to study your metrics. I like to consider myself a nerd. And basically, we have a team of nerds looking at numbers in order to guarantee that we can produce the best results. Now, we talked about Airbnb, so let's focus on Airbnb because it's one of the most important channels. Airbnb gives us some very interesting insights into how your listing is performing. So we don't have to be rocket scientists, we just have to read the metrics, right? And one of the very important metrics that it gives us is this one right here, how many times you're showing up on the homepage, and most importantly, what percentage of times people are clicking on your listing. This graph right here shows you across all of the listings that we manage, what is the average percentage of times that they show up on the first page, the average click-through rate, the average conversion rate. Because of our volume, we have a very close relationship with Airbnb, and they've been kind enough to share with us some of their numbers as well as IntelliHost. We know that the market average for conversion is about 0.3%, meaning for every 1,000 searches, you should get about 3 bookings. I'm happy that our average is actually close to 0.7. So everything that I've been showing you here is actually with intent of increasing that conversion. Now, of course, we want to have the most competitive price, but before lowering your prices, we always verify if this conversion rate, what's called the click rate, that Airbnb is giving it to us right here, we want to make sure that that click rate is at least 23% or higher, or around 23%. Because if it's lower, it could mean that we have the right price, but maybe what's wrong is the main picture. Maybe what's wrong is the title. Maybe when we first put the listing live, that picture of the pool was giving us great results. But now that everybody has a very similar picture, we have to come up with something different, right? So it's very important before not only changing prices, we also look into this. So don't think that we're just playing the game of, oh, it's not renting, just lower the price. That would be stupid. That's not the way to maximize revenues. You have to look at it in a holistic way. Now, we talked about reviews, and this is the part where Stellar Rentals plays such an important role in making this happen, and it has to happen with your collaboration, right? And 5-star reviews have become even more important than ever, because you might recall before Airbnb having this concept of a super host. It still exists, but it has completely been pushed aside to what's called now the guest favorite review. So it shows right and center in front of every search that you make. You have this guest favorite, which you probably, in case you're wondering, you get it only if you have a rating of 4.9 or more during the last 90 days. So this property, even though it has 4.72, is because during the last 90 days, actually the average has been 5-star. And you can see it anytime you search. Many of our properties, I shouldn't say most, but many of our properties do have this guest favorite, and it does make a difference in terms of your conversion. Why it does make a difference? Because, of course, people trust what other people are saying, because now it's right there on your screen, up right and center. And also because you can sort things now, whereas before you could sort things, and you still do somewhere out Superhost. Now, one of the main ways you can sort things is by actually filtering things by guest favorites. And of course, Airbnb has also now included this guest favorite banner, as well as Superhost, but you can actually see how the guest favorite has become even more prominent and very important. So getting good ratings is super important. But remember, guest ratings don't just come for free. What elements attract those best ratings? Of course, cleaning. The Stellar Rentals team, I know that they have a lot of things in place to ensure that your cleaning is properly done, so that people go and double check your property before guests arrive. Maintenance has to be well taken care of. The attention that the guests receive via the concierge or via the Angel Host team that is responding to them 24/7 plays a super important role. The response time plays an important role. And of course, pricing. If you overpay for a property, you're more likely to give a bad review. If you feel that you pay the right price, you're more likely to leave a good rating. So all of these things, there's no magic formula. It's just hard work on all different aspects of the business. Now, Stellar Rentals, like I mentioned, great property manager. They have a great team. They make sure to train people well. Like all property management companies that we work with around the world, I'm sure sometimes, mistakes are made, but for the most part, with what we've seen, they do a great job. They have checklists, they provide training, they monitor your properties, they give proper recognition to the team, which we always say is a best practice. If you want to make sure that your most important asset, which is your people, stay with you and continue providing a good job. And we have this Angel Host team, which is the international team that I just mentioned, the team that I'm leading, which is a group of specialists that do revenue management, guest services 24 hours a day, so on and so forth. I mentioned how important replying quickly it is. When any of your guests arrive in Playa del Carmen or Tulum, of course, they can reach out to the concierge who lives there, who's right there. But if they contact us for a reservation inquiry, or they lost their access code at 2 a.m. in the morning, there's the Angel Host team that is going to be replying within 6 minutes. Even though the market average is 45, we reply very quickly, and that allows us also to have good ratings. Now, very important, and it's something that you need to play game with your account manager. When something goes wrong, because things do go wrong, let's not fool ourselves. Things go wrong. Even when the best intentions, the best clean, the best maintenance, there are always things that could go wrong. And we always say it's better to give the client, the guest, a small discount or a small gesture than to get a bad review, right? So it's very important. This is something that we recommend to all of our clients. And of course, if for some reason your property gets a bad review, it's always important we take care of that, of responding accordingly, And of course, if the guest did not respect the rules, we actually do contact Airbnb, and we're not always successful, but sometimes we are in removing those bad reviews under the grounds that the guest did not respect your rules. So I would just like to end with this phrase. Let's not forget this. We are in the hospitality business. So once again, if you want your home to be your second home, you don't need to follow any of this advice that I just mentioned. And it's perfectly valid. If you're an owner that has your property for leisure, you want to go there with your family, and whatever money comes in from rentals, that's a plus. Fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. And I know that Stella Rentals has clients that think that way. On the other hand, if you want to treat your property as a business, you have to treat it, if you want business results, you have to treat it as a business, and you have to act accordingly. And that's a recommendation. So this brings the presentation to an end, at least for now. I think I'm just 3 minutes late because I wanted to leave some time for questions, either for myself or for the Stella Rentals team. So
there are some questions actually, Eduardo. I don't know if you want to read them, or should we read them, or...
Perfect. Yeah, let me look into this. Thank you, Ruben. And I know that Anita might have received some additional questions on the side, but let's start with the ones that we have on the screen here. Jim is asking, what level of remodeling are we talking about? What is the cost estimate for the budget? Well, it depends very much on the property. I have an example of a 3-bedroom penthouse in Playa del Carmen that was built 10 years ago. And the investment was about $30,000. I mean, when you look at it that way, it's not too much per year. And we're talking about, changing floors, changing bathrooms, changing the mattresses and other things. So it doesn't necessarily mean destroying the condo completely, but just putting it up to today's standards. Maybe the television that you have is a little bit old and you need a smart TV. Maybe your air conditioning is now failing too much, and it's important to have a new one. That's the type of, it's not crazy. It's usually what hotels do. They typically, remodel rooms every 5 to 10 years, depending on the quality of the resort. I have another question here that says, can you explain further the legend on one of the slides that says, from the 1st to the 31st, 36 property managers? Do you mean that for Tulum it's an estimated 36 PMs? Okay, I'll get to this question at the end, and I'll be very happy to go back to that slide where we were comparing, I believe, we were getting the numbers from the markets, and I'll be very happy to get to that. Let me just get through some of the other questions. What does it mean, the 8 bars in each of the sections of the graph of the listing performance? Okay, I'll get back to that as well. I'll just go walk through the presentation again. It's a good question. It just meant different months, and we track this thing every single month. That's why we have an overall average, but we track it on a monthly basis. Jim is also asking, how often are you analyzing the click rate for a specific property? How often do we analyze the click-through rate? We analyze this every single month. And if we see that your property has no bookings for more than 7 days, depending on the time of the year, we relook at it once again, even if the month hasn't gone by, because we need to keep a very close eye on these numbers. We actually have technologies that allow us to download this information from Airbnb to have it right on our screens so that we can act much faster to this. Okay, before I get back to the presentation, I have another question here from Christopher. How you beat the bad comments for construction in the area? I feel for you, Christopher. This is a tough one, right? I mean, you don't control construction. You don't control the noise. And yet sometimes people leave bad comments because of the construction. So how can this be avoided? If you know that there's going to be construction in the area, if your account manager knows that there's going to be construction in the area, they can instruct our team to include that in your listing. If your listing says, please note, there's an hotel being built next door and you can experience some construction noise, and then there's a bad review for this particular reason, the team at Angel Host can send a request to Airbnb to be removed, right? So it can be done. but it's important to have that ahead of time. Now, when this happens without us knowing or you knowing, as it many times happened, your neighbor decided to start remodeling his walls, and there's really not much we can do but apologize. Maybe it's better to give a small discount to the client to make the guest feel heard, that we care about his vacation or her vacation, and offer something in return. I many times say it's better to do the hard thing, which is to give a small rebate, than to do what's fair, which would be to just basically tell the guest, well, I'm sorry, it's obviously not our fault. Of course, it's not your fault. Of course, it's not our fault. But unfortunately, in the guest's mind, is something that we magically control. So by just showing a sign of appreciation and saying, here's, a 10% discount, it's better to sacrifice a little bit of the revenue, just like you would do in any business, but to get that good review. Okay. Okay, we have another question. I love it. Please keep the questions coming in. That's exactly what we're here for, to answer any questions that you might have. My property is not always shown in the listing of Booking or Airbnb, even if it meets all conditions. Okay, this is a very common question that we have. I'm doing my searches and I'm not coming up. The fact that you're not seeing the results for you does not mean that you're not showing up. In fact, the only way you can truly tell if you're showing up on the screen or not is by looking at the metrics. And let me go back to this slide right here and this one right here. This is what tells you how many times. In fact, Airbnb tells you how many times you're being displayed on the homepage. So that's what could indicate that there's an issue, not whether you see the property or not, because you could be doing a search and for the specific area and still the Airbnb algorithm doesn't want to present a listing to you. Doesn't mean that you're not there. It just means that the Airbnb has decided with their magic and their in artificial intelligence that this is not the right property for you. Now, eventually it should show up. But of course, if you don't have bookings and you don't find yourself, contact your account manager at Stella. They'll be able to get in touch with the team at Angel Host and get a very specific report on what type of visibility your property is getting and to determine if there's a problem. But our team should be able to catch that early on. How many properties are managed by each property manager? I don't really understand that question. I know that the team at Stella Rentals manages a bit close to 200 properties, I believe. Probably one of the largest, if not the largest, property manager in the area. But there's others that have 5 properties, 10 properties, 20 properties. There's a lot of good vacation rental managers as well. Jim is asking, can we get access to the reviews on Airbnb to see what is being said and what issues may need to be addressed? Good question, Jim. I know that, of course, you could go directly into your Airbnb listing and you can read the reviews. We also, if you do not have access to this, you can please ask your account manager at Stella Rentals. Let me actually exit here quickly. I'm going to share my screen again. Stella Rentals specifically provides you with an owner's dashboard. And within the owner's dashboard, you have all the information about your property and how it's performing versus the market. You can see all that information. And one of the things that you can see in this report that you have access to are your ratings, right? In the last 12 months, your ratings in the last 30 days, if you have any. So ask for access to this report if you currently don't have it. But unfortunately, you won't be able to actually read the reviews for now. The best way to read those reviews would be to actually go directly to your listing. If you don't have access to your listing, just request it from your account manager at Stella Rentals, and they'll be able to provide that to you. Okay, let's have a look. What are the questions that we have here? I think I've answered most of them. And it says, okay, that another question that came into the chat was saying, I have a question regarding rental sizes. If the vast majority of the properties are 1 to 2 bedrooms, and I have a property of 4 bedrooms, how can I interpret this metric? Is it a bad decision to have a 4-bedroom when most of the guests are looking for 1 bedroom? No, it doesn't mean that most people are looking for 1 or 2 bedrooms. It just means that the builders decided to build more 1 and 2 bedrooms. In fact, what I can tell you based on what we've seen is that larger properties with 3, 4, 5 bedrooms tend to perform quite well. And the reason is because there's actually not that much supply for those. So we get this question often from people that have, let's say, a 3-bedroom property with a 1-bedroom lock-off that can be rented as a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom. Our recommendation is to keep it as a 3-bedroom practically until the last minute. Now, if you're not booked for tomorrow and someone wants it as a 1-bedroom, okay, go for it. But for the most part, we're better off leaving the properties at the size that they are originally intended at. Sometimes if it's a very large property with 6 or 7 bedrooms, it could make sense. But for the most part, don't worry. Having a 4-bedroom, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, a lot of groups will want to rent that 4-bedroom, right? Lots of big families and whatnot. So very important. Thomas is asking us how difficult it is for a new listing to get a booking. Great question. Great question. I love this one. Not that hard, actually. One of the parts of the presentation that I did not show, but I had prepared in case this question came up, has to do with new listings. So it turns out that new listings do have an advantage, okay, but not for a long time. So when you launch a new listing, the Airbnb algorithm doesn't know yet how good or how bad it is. So it has to artificially give it some sort of boost, right? It comes up with a little icon here that says new, and it's just basically giving you a little bit of a boost to see if you get bookings. Now, the problem is that if your ratings are high because you say, oh, it's a brand new unit, the prices should be high, big mistake. We lost that first week or first 2 weeks of artificial boost we get from Airbnb. After 2 weeks, we're no longer a new property, and we lost that opportunity. That's why we always insist when a property is launched, it has to be launched at a really good price. Yes, it hurts to get those first 2 or 3 bookings at a low price, I know, but it's best for the listing to create some good momentum. So, because if your listing has no traction, sometimes it's very hard to revive, and sometimes we have to relaunch it. And we do relaunch properties whenever they don't get bookings. Are you doing targeted marketing of the properties in Airbnb or Booking.com? I don't think there's such a thing as doing targeted marketing. You have to make sure that all of your amenities are correctly displayed, so that when someone says, "I'm looking for a place with a hair dryer or that has a pool," your property will come up, right? Because that's a very common mistake, not having all the right amenities checkmarked and therefore not showing up. Okay, Christopher is saying cleaning, laundry, and cleaning fee of the pool will be charged all in the cleaning fee. Typically not. What we recommend to charge to the guests on the cleaning fee is just the cost of the cleaning. If you try to include everything else, you will likely start scaring guests away. So that's unfortunately a cost that you have to absorb. But generally speaking, your rates should be better if you have a pool or you have other amenities in your property. Does perceived value, customer value, play a role in setting pricing? Very, very good question. It's a very tricky one, right? And I would say no. And let me explain. If you're the Ritz-Carlton, if you are, the Four Seasons Hotel, you don't want to necessarily rent at a lower rent because that can affect your branding, right? The world of vacation rentals is different. No one knows your property as the Ritz-Carlton or the vacation rental, right? They're just looking for a property. And if they happen to see a great property with a lower price and it has good ratings, they're going to book it, right? They're going to book it. And the next person booking is not going to say, oh, this is a property that is usually rented very cheap. The next person doesn't know at what price you rented at the last minute, right? So what counts is the reviews, not necessarily the price at which you rent. Whereas if you're the Ritz-Carlton, you don't want to cheapen your brand by renting that room at the last minute at $50, right? Because that does affect the perceived value of the Ritz-Carlton. That does not happen in the world of vacation rentals. And that's why we recommend being very flexible when it comes to the prices. In fact, like I said, sometimes it happens that you rent at a lower price and you're going to get an amazing review because people are going to be like, this was amazing for the price that I paid. No one knows what price you paid, but the comment is like, for the price that you paid is amazing. So the next person searching sees your price very high, but he reads a comment that says that the price that I paid, the person doesn't know how much was the price paid before. So that's something interesting to know. Okay, so I think we have come to the end of the presentation. Oh, and I promised to answer this one about the 36 property managers. That's a detail on the presentation. Let me share my screen once again, and let me go all the way back to the beginning. This is a technical question, but I like technical questions as well. So basically, let's go back. I'm almost there. And I believe where is this? No, it's not here. Let me try to get to that. It's not, oh, maybe here. Yeah. So basically these numbers, these graphs right here come from key data. Key data, like I said, they aggregate the information from us and from other professional property managers. So when we try to benchmark the data, we try to see what the market is like. This is pulling information from the 1st of January to the 31st of May, specifically in Playa del Carmen. And this sample comes from 32 property managers. So you know it's representative information, right? It's a representative sample with more or less 950 properties. So if the number here was 50 properties, it would not be a representative sample. This is what our data, our data analysts look into to determine what's the reality of the market like. Not what is the neighbor saying, or what is my friend saying, or what is my group on WhatsApp saying about what is the occupancy rate in my building. It's about what is the reality in the market. Okay. Perfect. I think we answered everything. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to reach out to your account managers at Stella Rentals. They will in turn forward those questions to the team at Angel Host. I hope you found this useful. I hope you took some interesting learnings about how we try to, best manage your property. And yeah, I wish you all a very good afternoon. And on behalf of the team at Stella Rentals and Angel Host, thank you so much for joining. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Have a lovely day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.